Jane McGonigal, the author of an important new book, Reality is Broken, with one of perhaps the most provocative titles of the year. Jane, why and how is reality broken?
So I believe reality is broken compared to games in a very particular way. That when we play games, we get to be the best versions of ourselves. The science shows it. If you talk to gamers, they'll say the same thing. We're more motivated, we set more ambitious goals, we're more likely to cooperate and trust other people, we're more likely to be resilient in the face of failure. There are all these things that we get to be in games that in real life it's much harder. We're afraid of failure, we're stressed out when we're given a difficult task, we're more likely to be selfish, we're more likely to be socially awkward. So it just seems to me that as a planet, we're spending 3 billion hours a week playing video games. We ought to start to look at ways that we could give people a chance to be the best version of themselves in reality, not just in video games.
Why do you think we find what you call real life, although it's increasingly hard for me to distinguish between real life and gaming, why do we find real life, and I think you're right, why do we find it to be so much more of a struggle?
Well, I think one of the crucial distinctions is between stress, negative stress, and positive stress, or scientists call it eustress. And eustress is when we decide that we want to be challenged. And it's physiologically and biochemically exactly the same experience as when we get stress from someone else. So my boss comes in and yells at me and tells me to do this thing and puts the fear of God into me if I don't get it done in time. Versus I go home and decide that I want to tackle this project and I'm doing it because I want to. It's the same experience, but when we experience the external pressure, then the adrenaline feels like fear rather than excitement, or the attention centers focusing in our brain and sharpening our attention feels like panic or anxiety, right? Rather than self-motivation. And the one thing we know about games is nobody plays a game unless they want to. We play games when we're bored or when we're frustrated or when we're lonely. We use them to put ourselves into this state of heightened engagement. And in real life, it's a psychological thing. When the stress comes externally, when somebody else is directing our lives, it's hard to experience that same level of motivation and engagement.
But isn't another distinction that in real life, failure hurts?
Yeah.
Whereas in gaming, it doesn't really. You just start on the next game. So in real life, if you lose your job, if you lose your loved one, if you lose your partner, if you fail, it's a pretty distressing experience. Whereas in gaming, it doesn't really matter. So there's much less on the line in gaming.
But I think we have to ask ourselves, and these are really provocative ideas, but why is failure so punishing in real life? So the Quest to Learn school example in New York is really a great example of this. Why do we punish kids for failing at tests? Why are we so incredibly cruel about failure in schools? Why is it that you get one shot and that's it? That's a product of our design of the school systems. That's not reality. There's no reality that if I fail a test, my life is over, right? Nobody's actually been harmed, but it does me harm the way that our schools are designed. Why can't it be more like a game where it's about ultimately achieving that learning, achieving that skill set? Why does it have to be a punishing failure? But we can also make games where there's room for a margin of error. I'm really excited about these science games that are letting gamers manipulate in 3D environments protein or RNA, and then scientists are looking at what the gamers are doing and using that to develop new medicines for cancer or Alzheimer's. Now the gamers aren't treating real patients, so nobody's going to die if they're wrong. They're in a 3D environment. But the scientists can then take what the gamers are doing and use their expertise to make it real. So there's a lot of room in between punishing failure and the total safety of games to play.
So what you're saying then is reality can be refashioned as a game.
Yeah, we can be inspired to tackle harder problems in real life if we can figure out how to introduce elements of game design into that reality.
Do you think Wall Street can be redesigned as a game?
Well, Wall Street's already a game, but it's a pretty miserable game, right?
Especially if you lose.
Yeah, well, but also it's not very cooperative, right? So one of the most interesting things about video games and computer games in the last 10 years is this emergence of cooperative gaming. Before computer and video games, if you look at the long history of human games, dice games, card games, Olympic games, they're very competitive. You're either playing by yourself or you're trying to beat somebody else. But now we have all these games that are cooperative. They're, what economists call non-zero sum games. Wall Street's not played like a non-zero sum game, right? It's played as a zero sum game. So yeah, you could take some of the amazing ideas of cooperative extreme scale collaboration and possibly rethink the game theory of the real economy. That would be good.